Hello everyone, and welcome to the regular Flange with Intoxicus Flanging. Um, there's some format changing and some stuff flanging about that's new and different. If you're curious what's going on, check out that channel update video. Not really, just don't really have the time or anything to go too deep into that. But a bunch of stuff's going to be changing, new graphic design, new music. I don't want to say rebrand, but more like being more concise about the branding of Intoxicus Flanging and that, because I realized my branding actually wasn't very good in the first place to even try and rebrand. Anyways, we're getting a bit sidetracked. Just gotta mention stuff's changing, taking a rich break from Twitch streaming for a couple or 3 weeks here, and yeah, anyways, if you want to get updated on all that, it's in the channel update video that breaks everything down, what's going on, but gotta mention it because there's a bunch of new stuff that's changing up and all that. And so today's video, I hope you brought your psychology towels and also your content warning towels, because we'll just get through the content warning kind of flange right now. There's going to be some kind of messed up content in this video, in the sense of like people directing some really unfortunate and crappy hate at a voice actor and Neil Druckmann. So we're going to look at those comments. There's going to be some nasty things there. So just getting a little bit prepped for that. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about The Last of Us 2 and how it's become kind of this like weird honeypot for all sorts of crazy hate and emotional reactions and projection and displacement. And yes, emotional displacement isn't really a psychology term, but the qualifier of emotional kind of helps clarify like what I believe is going on here with all this crazy hate and everything. So we do kind of need to define some terms, because there's people, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we define terms, we need to look at what's going on here. So assuming I can hit the right hotkey, oh, I gotta be focused on OBS for the hotkeys to work, which never used to be a problem. Thanks, Windows updates, which also broke HDR even more so lately, but we're not going to talk about that. But it's like, god damn, Windows, stop breaking HDR even more. What the fuck happened last update? Anyways, that's a total sidetrack. Back to the topic. So Laura Bailey's a voice actor for one or more characters. I don't want to spoil anything, but being specific, a voice actor for characters in The Last of Us 2, and like with this stuff, it makes extra less sense than all the other hate, because like Laura Bailey didn't write the script. She didn't write her dialogue. She's just voice acting it to the best of her abilities. It's not her fault what happened to characters. It didn't happen to characters, or she's not the character. She's not the writer. She's not the fucking producer. It's yeah. It's just, it's so extra crazy. It's like, yeah. So just the hate being directed at the voice actor is just extra insane. It's like, come on, people. It's not even, if you are going to be hateful like that, at least direct it at the people who actually did the things you're complaining about. Not that I'm saying it's justified. It's just like, it's just, that's how ridiculous it is. So I mean, it's being directed at Neil Druckmann, who was writing and all of that, and it's still bullshit for it to happen. Even if I think there's some things he really did wrong and messed up, and he might not quite, I can criticize a lot about The Last of Us 2 and its writing and its storytelling and other things, but I can do that in a not so hateful manner and not resort to just outright insults, hate, bigotry, etc. It's just, there's no excuse for this. And so before we define terms here, we do have to touch on one thing. It's almost certain that a significant portion of this stuff is coming from Russian trolls, but maybe also Chinese government trolls. It's not so confirmed how much the Chinese government's dabbling in creating division, but it's well established and been well proven that there's Russian troll farms that are their goal is to create division and fuck with our culture and make things more divisive for us. And this is the kind of thing they do and would and are engaging in. Someone mentioned that a lot of this stuff tends to pop up around 9 a.m. Russia time. Well, depending on which time zone, but within a window where the Russian trolls are known for being most vigorous in their activities. Which I don't think that's a coincidence. I was going to make a joke, but I don't feel much about making jokes about something this serious. There's other content I'll joke around more about, but I just have a hard time making jokes about this kind of stuff. It's a bit too serious for that. Anyway, so the Russian trolls, they're real. They do exist. And I guess what's up for debate is how prevalent they are and more that kind of thing. But there's new accounts that seem pretty obviously be trolls posting at the classically known to be high activity for troll times. So there's almost certainly a good portion of this stuff that's just it's being put out there by trolls with the intent for division, but that doesn't mean there's not a good chunk of this that is real people being really ridiculous. And it's we got to try and filter that out without reviewing every account and every post that's posted something shitty and hateful. Kind of difficult to do. So we it's something that needs to be discussed and accounted for, but it doesn't do away with the fact that there are real people being truly this hateful, and it truly needs to frickin' end. And apparently, I really need to stop saying fuck in these videos because I guess it fucks me over in the algorithm, but I guess today's not that day. I need to start saying frack instead. Anyways, so let's get to the defining the terms. Displacement and brain fart. Oh man, my brain sometimes. Displacement and starts with a P here. I'll remind myself. Projection. Second time I've done this, trying to film this video. Anyways, so displacement, kind of what it sounds like. So that's where there's like an emotion that a person is feeling, and pretty much it's just taking emotions out on other people where the person can't handle the emotion they're feeling, or they're not very self-aware of it, or they're not very good at that kind of emotional processing, or haven't been taught it or developed those skills, etc., etc. So they're having a hard time dealing with their own emotional state, and they basically take it out on someone or something else. And it's a human thing. It's something everyone has to kind of figure out. But emotionally mature people are able to recognize that and be like, oh, I need to stop displacing, even if they're not using that terms. Most people say taking it out, taking their anger out on someone or that kind of thing. So that's basically what displacement is like taking an emotion out on someone else, when really the person doing the displacing needs to sit there, process, and deal with that emotion. And the example used in Wikipedia, which the Wikipedia entries on this aren't the best. They're just it's a quick reference. So we will look at a better source that explains them a little bit better. But they do have a decent example here. Person who's had a bad day at work comes home and yells at the family. That's displacement, taking the anger out on their family. That's just a classic example of displacement. And it does kind of parallel projection. They're both defense mechanisms, and the projection and displacement have some kind of similar qualities, but they have nuanced differences also. So let's talk about projection. Projection is more when there's something about the person that they're not able to handle, so they then put that quality on someone or something else. There's an example of it I've experienced in recent months with a content creator I used to really deeply respect and have a lot of admiration to and look up to them, and not so much anymore after this incident. So jumped into a topic. I think I did make a mistake where I jumped in a little bit maybe too enthusiastically, but I wasn't angry or emotional. I was very interested in discussing the topic, and I was just like, I do know I have a thing where I can be a little bit like, yeah, and I can just like, I can maybe be a bit overly intense sometimes, but that's not an emotional intensity. That's just a measure of how into the topic I am. And I feel I did come off wrong, but I was accused of being angry and emotional. And I was just straight up like, no, I'm calm. I'm really into this. I'm kind of passionate about it, but angry and emotional, no. And then after that comment, and it's something that had always been there, but I just didn't really notice. I noticed that the YouTuber content creator I'm talking about can be quite angry and emotional in their content quite often. And then once I was like watching some of their content after that, I was like, wait, you're the angry and emotional one. Now this makes sense. You're projecting your anger and emotion at others in a manner to dismiss them so they don't have to deal with criticism that really contradicts what they believe. So there can be nuanced layers where the projection is not just a defense mechanism against the quality they don't like about themselves or that society or culture disapproves of, but also to not have to deal with criticism or cognitive dissonance that's deeply or long held. So there can be some deeper layers to displacement and projection where it's not just a defense mechanism about something they don't like about themselves or society and culture says no, that's not good. It can be something where it's a way for them to avoid addressing a cognitive dissonance or something like that. So there can be some deeper layers going into this too. And let's move on to that webpage. So this is Simply Psychology. There's other good sources. I found this one to be a good one. It just goes over defense mechanisms in general, and it's a pretty good one. So yeah, their definitions are pretty good. I quite like them. So projection, this involves individuals attributing their own acceptable thoughts, feelings, and motives to another person. So pretty much what I just said about projection, but I went deeper with it. Displacement, satisfying an impulse, i.e. aggression with a substitute object. That one's not so clear, but that's basically a fancy way of taking it out on someone or something else. So a more extreme example for displacement, someone who's frustrated by work and abuses their pet. Another example of displacement. I could see people maybe arguing this one, but I think it's a more relatable example of displacement. You're angry at a video game or something, you're frustrated, or I shouldn't say you, but because I'm sure the people that listen are watching don't do this. And it's something I've never really been prone to doing. I might like drop it heavily or kind of give it a light toss in frustration, but like actually smashing a controller or keyboard, never been a thing I've ever been into. But as you can probably guess what I'm getting to, gamer who has emotional issues gets really frustrated with game, then smashes their controller. They're displacing their feelings towards the game onto the controller because they can't break the game in the same manner because it's software and doesn't have physical existence. So that's an interesting example that came to mind. But yeah, so let's bring this all back to The Last of Us 2 and the hate going on for it. And the hotkeys. I'll figure that out with Windows one of these days. The new Windows update also broke HDR even more than it was also broken in Windows. So it's like, man, as much as Windows updates do add in good things and do fix things, sometimes they fuck some things up even worse. Like the hotkeys weren't like that before. Anyways, so with all this Last of Us 2 hate and stuff, what I think is going on is, there's multiple layers to this. I think there's some political triggers that are wrapped up in contrarianism, where people they find something they dislike about one side or the other, and they get kind of contrarian to it, and that doesn't mean criticisms of a certain political side or other are any more or less valid, but it skews people's perceptions because now they're just like, oh, the opposite of whatever they are. And that winds up setting a bias where now, because of these political things, people have this perception, oh, this represents this political side or the other political side. So I think there's a portion of it where people see this game because of certain characters and stuff as, kind of being politically left. So they're like, oh, it's on the side I'm opposite to, so we're going to hate on this. I think there's a factor of that, which isn't necessarily so much projection displacement per se, and that's kind of a different issue, and that's more just contrarianism, where people are like, "Oh, that's the opposite of me, so I gotta hate on that," and that's a fucked up toxic poison in of itself. And I could do a whole video on contrarianism in video games. I think that's on my list of planned content, actually, is contrarianism in video game discourse. So aside from the factor of contrarianism, I think what we got is a lot of emotional reactions to certain things in the game that people are having a hard time dealing with. Part of that being expectations that I kind of a mixed bag with the expectations. Sometimes people set these up in their own head and it has nothing to do with any of the advertising or marketing. And some of the advertising or marketing did set up some expectations, but some of those expectations were set up, were incorrect on purpose, because there was like a bait and switch plan that was like supposed to be like that, and it was supposed to work well, but it kind of didn't work like it was supposed to. And apparently it was inspired by some other things in a previous video game we won't talk about, just don't have time for it. So kind of messy there, but more what I'm getting at is there's certain things that weren't done well where I wasn't too pleased about how the game went about certain events. And I had some emotional reactions to that where I was like, what the fuck is this bullshit? I can't believe they went about this so ham-handedly and obviously and transparently, where it kind of ruins what they're going for. And maybe what happened is they just didn't realize how savvy the audiences can be now, and how good audiences can be at sniffing out some of these tricks. And there's a lot of these tricks where they get sniffed out, they get ruined. So I think people had some strong emotional reactions to some specific events and characters, and instead of dealing with that internally, they wound up displacing those emotional reactions onto the voice actor Neil Druckmann and so on, and hatefully so, because a lot of times when people are having emotional reactions, they can lose themselves and feel justified in doing things that normally would not, well, I shouldn't say normally, that are just not acceptable, but they feel justified in it, in their emotional reaction. And part of that is not quite displacement and projection, but it's more just a human thing where it goes into something where it's, I don't like dichotomies, but I think there is a validity to this, where there's people that don't want others to feel the pain they felt, and then there's people that do want others to feel the pain they felt because it validates their pain. And man, just as I said it, that really clicked, like on a deeper level, where I think too a factor in this is they want the people behind this to feel the pain or emotions or the hurt they felt when they played through the game and ran into shit where there's just like, oh, what the hell is this? This makes me feel bad. And so, yeah, so basically, with various levels and nuances and factors, people want to play in the game. They don't like something that happened. They feel bad about it. Oh, excuse me. And now they're like, oh, I want the people who were responsible for this feel bad like I did, which is bullshit and not right. And we need to start educating not just kids, but adults too, which is much trickier to do adult education, especially this kind of stuff, to manage their emotions better and to be able to process their emotions better and be more self-aware of their emotions. And that's so much easier said than done. And it's one of those tricky things where it's like, you know, where do we even go? And it's good to have a starting point of understanding what's going on and how we got here and all that. But when it comes to like trying to flange up or figure out any sort of solution or path to a solution, it gets a lot trickier and muddier because we do have to respect people's freedoms and all that. But the line for freedom is when it has negative impact or harm onto another person or group of other people. So as a culture and society as a whole, we really need to start having some discussions about this, about like, how do we teach people to handle their emotions better? How do we teach people to regulate their emotions better? How do we publicly encourage and having a derp on the word, but synonymous word for encourage. But how do we cultivate on a bigger picture scale better emotional processing and handling and all that flange? And yeah, that's just not it's just not easy. It's a tricky one. There's a lot to figure out. There's a lot we need to talk about. There's a lot of honest conversations we need to have that aren't really happening. There's a lot of bias that needs to be cut through. And this also isn't something exclusive to this game. Toxic fandom reactions, and I don't want to say toxic fandoms because maybe perhaps like there's a some but not all factor to it, where there's a sometimes the vocal minorities can give a bad impression of a fandom, although there are some legitimately toxic fandoms out there. But it's very easy for a vocal minority to give a false perception of a fandom and make them look more toxic than they are as a whole, when it's actually just a small segment that the rest of the fandom is like, oh my god, you idiot assholes, get out of here, you don't represent us. And yeah, there's so much to talk about and figure out, and that's also what the comments are for. If you want to jump in and get discussing this kind of stuff, because it's something we got to figure out. There's just something needs to change. It needs to change sooner than later. And how do we go about changing that? I'm not really sure. It's easy to sit here and say, oh, we need to get better at emotional regulation and that kind of stuff. But to actually execute that and put it in action is just so much more difficult and complex. And it's beyond any single person. So hopefully this can help get that kind of discussion going, where with at least the beginnings of an understanding of what's going on and how we got here and how and why people are reacting like they are when they're actual real people, not Russian trolls. Sorry to so much, but it's just I get stuck on this stuff where it's just like I English linguistics fails me sometimes, where I'm just like, it's not that I don't have the words, it's English fails at the linguistics to express what I want to express, and I get kind of fucking stuck. So I'm sure I'll get better at navigating this. I mean, English is my first language. Just English is a weird language like that, and I'm into linguistics, so it's just I get hung up sometimes on using specific linguistics to really make sure I'm saying the right things, which obviously I'm not perfect at. Anyways, we're getting a bit sidetracked and tangential. We need to get this wrapped up because we're hitting time limit territory here. Let me know what you think. Do you have anything to add with the emotional reactions being expressed poorly and not being internalized properly and all that kind of stuff? Do you think there's other factors I haven't addressed going on here? Do you have any ideas to work towards potential solutions or what we can start doing? And quite often, if you try and talk to these people, and some but not all, but too often, if you do try and talk to these people, it doesn't go well because they're, maybe they're not that always that shitty of a person, and it's not that they. I'm probably not expressing myself very well here, but perhaps they only get shitty when they have these emotional reactions, but otherwise they're not so shitty. And then if that's the case, it's like, well, how do we fix this emotional handling thing? And I don't want us to become like Vulcans either. Like, I think we can learn a lot from the fictional Vulcans. And also, what we can't learn from the fictional Vulcans is we don't want to go all as far as they did. And there's just, this is one of those topics where I've got a lot to say and not enough time to say it. And there's just so much I want to discuss with people to try and work some of these thought outs a bit more. So yeah, flange it up in the comments. Let me know what you think. What do you have to add? This is something I truly really want to try and figure this out and try and figure out what can we do to work towards a solution, even if it's just, I shouldn't say just, but even if the beginnings is something as simple as not tolerating it and speaking out against it and being like, no, this is wrong, handle your emotions better. Or confronting people and being like, yo, if you're saying this stuff, you need to talk to a psychologist about your lack of emotional maturity. Without, if you say it like that, it probably won't go over very well. And on that thought, maybe a potential solution or direction towards the solution is just for everyone to have some better education in how to talk to people who are having these emotional reactions, because it's really easy to fall into having a counter emotional reaction where it's like, oh, you're so hateful that just go fuck yourself. You're just a hateful person. Screw you. It's really easy to fall into that trap too, where it's easy to forget this person might be being hateful. They might have some messed up stuff going on, but they're still a person too. And if they had maybe been taught better, or had better education or better influences and examples growing up, they might not be like that. And it's not an inherent quality of this person. It's something learned that can be changed and unlearned. And that's something I think I really think that's something that really needs to be thought about and considered. Is quite often these people just they're poorly educated, they've had bad examples, they don't know better, although that's not always true. But so much some, but not all. But just thinking of Daryl Davis and that he's a black person that's converted over 200 racists and Nazis away from racism and Nazism. If he can do that, we can follow in his footsteps and learn from what he's been able to accomplish. I really look up to that man now that I know who he is. I need to find out more about him. Daryl Davis is an amazing human being. Just so much respect to him. But I think we can learn from his example there and be like, well, how do we talk to these people? How do we get through to them? How do we not get caught up in our own emotional reaction to their hatefulness? And that's easier said than done, of course. Anyways, I gotta wrap this up. I'm rambling on. I hope you've taken away a lot to think about. I hope I've given a different perspective that helps understand what's going on with all the hatefulness and craziness, not in just with The Last of Us 2, but just in general. And even if it doesn't matter how bad they fucked up with characters and certain parts of the narrative. I think there's some parts they really made some serious mistakes on, but that's never, ever an excuse to be hateful like that. Never, ever. And if you want to have a conversation with the people that are actually responsible for the narrative and the plot and all that stuff, you're not going to have that conversation or get through to them by hating at them. If you want to maybe actually have something be altered or changed in the games to kind of make things not so, or make things more optimal than they were, throwing hate at him isn't going to accomplish anything. And that's the thing with the emotional reactions, is all the rational thinking and everything kind of just falls apart, and then it's just emotionally driven, and that's a very human thing. And I'm not justifying or rationalizing or anything like that. It's understanding how this happens, and that's the goal and the point of this content. I hope I accomplished that, or at least in part, and I hope we can have some excellent and productive discussions about not only how this is happening, but what we can do to make positive changes about it. And yeah, that's the daily, or not daily flange, that's the regular flange for today. Hope you all have a good one, and remember to bring a towel. Damn, after going through this is a bit of a heavy topic. I'm like, I need some like clearing of myself after talking about stuff like this. So hope this wasn't too heavy for all y'all. Have a good one. Remember to bring a towel and all that good stuff. And oh yes, before I go, oh yeah, I won't bother with the like and subscribe stuff so much. Well, I guess I will subscribe and like and all that. Um, I don't know. It feels awkward on some of these heavier topics to try and be all self-promoting like that. Um, and I kind of forgot what I was going to say before. Oh, yeah. Speaking of awkward self-promotion, full flange. My first full flange will be for The Last of Us 2. It might be a really good full flange because it'll be interesting. Because I'll just full on break down what went wrong with parts of the narrative and stuff like that and how it could have been better. So it'll be a very interesting full flange. So hope you all check that out. That's might not show up until next week. Hoping to get that done by the end of this week, but probably not until next week. So yeah, have a good one. Remember to bring a towel. Sorry for going so far over time. Bye.